The afternoon sun slanted through the greasy windows of the diner, illuminating dust motes dancing in the heavy air. Zara moved through the familiar rhythm of her shift, the scent of stale coffee and frying bacon clinging to her dark red dress. She refilled salt shakers with a practiced efficiency, her movements fluid and economical, a quiet ghost in a world of clattering plates and droning conversations. Then the bell above the door chimed, a sharp, dissonant sound that cut through the noise. The diner fell silent. He walked in first, a man carved from shadow and steel, his black suit tailored so precisely it seemed a part of him. His name was whispered in places like this, a myth given flesh. Mr. Quan, the formidable Korean Mafia boss who controlled the city's arteries of power and fear. Two men, built like stone monoliths, flanked him, their eyes sweeping the room with cold, professional detachment. They chose the corner booth, the one with a clear view of both the entrance and the kitchen doors. Zara felt the shift in the atmosphere, the air crackling with a sudden, dangerous pressure. Her heart didn't race. Instead, a strange, cold calm settled in her veins. She had been waiting for this. Not for him, specifically, but for a moment like this. She picked up a menu and her notepad, her expression placid, betraying nothing of the storm gathering inside her. As she approached their table, she kept her gaze respectfully lowered, a perfect portrait of a subservient waitress. But as she stood beside the booth, her left hand, holding the notepad, was hidden from the view of his guards. There, beneath the table's edge, she made the signal. A slow, deliberate press of her middle finger to the fleshy base of her thumb, held for a single, resonant second. It was an ancient, forgotten gesture. A ghost of a promise. A declaration. Mr. Quan's eyes, dark and depthless, had been fixed on the menu, his expression one of utter disinterest. But out of the corner of his vision, he caught the movement. It was nothing, a flicker, a nervous tick a girl like her might have. Yet it was not. The pressure, the duration, the specific placement, it was a key turning in a lock he hadn't touched in 20 years. His posture didn't change, not by a single millimeter, but a stillness descended over him that was more terrifying than any overt threat. His enforcers felt it, their bodies tensing in response to their leader's silent command. He lifted his gaze from the menu and finally looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the cheap polyester of her dress, the faint sheen of exhaustion under her eyes, and the impossible, unwavering calm in their depths. He saw the signal replaying in his mind, a specter from a buried past. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. His two guards, without a word, rose and moved away, one stationing himself by the front door, the other by the kitchen. The few remaining patrons in the diner seemed to shrink, suddenly finding urgent reasons to pay their bills, and flee into the afternoon glare. Within minutes, the diner was empty, a silent stage set for a play only two people knew was beginning. The air grew thick with unspoken questions. Zara remained standing by the table, her notepad still in hand, her breathing even. Mr. Quan gestured to the seat opposite him. "Sit." His voice was low, a gravelly whisper that held the weight of command.
She didn't sit.
She met his gaze directly, and for the first time, she spoke. Her voice was clear, steady, and devoid of fear. "They sent Arthur to kill you tonight." The serpent, the name, a venomous secret whispered only in the deepest circles of the underworld, hung in the air between them. Mr. Quan froze, his hand hovering over his water glass. The world outside the diner window seemed to cease its motion. A flicker of something, disbelief, fury, perhaps even a sliver of fear, crossed Mr. Quan's features before being locked down behind a mask of cold granite. He studied her, his eyes narrowed into predatory slits, dissecting her piece by piece. She was a child, a waitress in a cheap diner. How could she possibly know that name? Arthur was a ghost, a rival so deeply embedded in the shadows that even some of Mr. Quan's most trusted men didn't know his true identity. "Who are you?" he asked, the words clipped, each one a tiny shard of ice. He was testing her, looking for the telltale signs of a bluff, the nervous flutter of an eyelid, the slight tremor in her hands. He found none. Zara held his gaze, her own expression a placid lake, hiding unfathomable depths. Who I am doesn't matter, she replied, her tone even. What matters is that the council has sanctioned a change in leadership. They believe your methods have become too loud, your presence too visible. Arthur is their instrument. Her words were precise, clinical, spoken with an authority that didn't belong in this greasy spoon. It was the language of his world, not hers. The council is a myth, he countered, his voice a low snarl. A story told to frighten children. And yet, the serpent is coming for you, she said, her calm unshakable. He will use the quarterly shipment at the docks as his stage. A fire at Warehouse 7 to draw your men east, while his team hits your car during the transit. They know your route. They know the armor on the sedan has a weak point just below the rear passenger side window. She delivered the information without emotion, a simple statement of fact. It was the last detail, the specific weakness of his personal vehicle, a flaw known only to him and the man who had built it, that shattered his composure. It was impossible. A complete and utter impossibility. This girl was not a trap. A trap was loud, messy, designed to create chaos. This was a scalpel, quiet and precise. This was information. My mother used to serve your father, Zara said softly, finally breaking the suffocating silence that followed her revelation. The statement landed with the force of a physical blow. Mr. Quan leaned back, the leather of the booth groaning in protest. His father. A man who had ruled with an iron fist and a code of honor so old it was practically scripture, a man dead for 2 decades. She was a keeper of whispers, Zara continued, her eyes distant for a moment, lost in a memory that felt like a lifetime ago. She wasn't a soldier or a killer. She was an observer. She listened to the city's secrets, and she remembered. She served him not with a gun, but with knowledge. Mr. Quan's mind raced, sifting through the faded archives of his memory. He recalled whispers of a clandestine network his father had maintained, a group of informants so secret they were known only as the listeners. He had dismissed them as folklore, another one of his father's paranoid legends. The signal, he breathed, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. It was the sign of the listener, Zara confirmed with a nod. A promise of silent loyalty. A vow to see what others miss, and to speak when all others are silent. She taught it to me before she died. She told me a day might come when the old ways would be needed again. When a Quan would need to listen, she finally slid into the booth opposite him, her movements graceful. The power dynamic in the small space had irrevocably tilted. She was no longer a waitress. She was a legacy. My mother saw this coming, she said, her voice dropping lower, imbued with a solemn weight. She saw the rot setting in, the new generation forgetting the codes that gave your organization its strength. They see power as a thing to be taken, not earned. Arthur is the worst of them. He has no honor. He will not just kill you. He will erase your name, your history, everything your father built. Mr. Quan stared at the young woman across from him, seeing not a waitress, but the ghost of an era he thought long dead. Her words carried the weight of prophecy, the chilling echo of his own deepest fears. The city had grown restless, the alliances he held together with threats and promises fraying at the edges. He had felt it, a subtle shift in the currents of power, but he had been unable to pinpoint its source. Now, the source had a name, and it was sitting in a red polyester dress, telling him he was about to die. He was a man who trusted no one, who saw traps in every kindness and betrayal in every smile. Yet her information was too precise, too perfect. To ignore it was suicide. To trust it could be a different, more elaborate form of the same. He needed to know more. He needed to see her in his world, away from the deceptive neutrality of this diner. If what you say is true, he began, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. You have just signed your own death warrant. Arthur's people will hunt you for what you know. They have to find me first, Zara replied, a faint ghost of a smile touching her lips for the first time. It was not a smile of mirth, but of confidence. It was terrifying. He made a decision, the kind that had kept him alive for years. He would pull this thread and see where it led, even if it unraveled everything. "There is a place," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "The old cannery by the river. Midnight. Come alone. If you are who you say you are, you will know how to get there without being followed. If you are a trap, the river is deep." It was not an invitation. It was a challenge. A test of her skill, her courage, her very existence. He was throwing her into the heart of the inferno to see if she would burn. Zara simply nodded, her expression unreadable. "I'll be there." Mr. Quan stood, his presence filling the small booth. He dropped $100 bill on the table, a gesture so automatic it was meaningless. He walked to the door, his guards falling into formation behind him. Just before he stepped out into the blinding sun, he paused and looked back at her. The girl, the waitress, the legacy. She was already clearing the table, as if the most powerful man in the city hadn't just threatened her life. The old cannery loomed against the bruised purple sky, a skeletal ruin reeking of rust and stagnant water. The moon was a sliver, offering little light to the crumbling docks and the dark, hungry maw of the river beside it. Zara moved through the shadows like a phantom, her footsteps silent on the cracked pavement. She hadn't taken a car or a cab. She'd used the city's forgotten pathways, service tunnels and overgrown alleyways, a map passed down from her mother, a cartography of secrets. When she arrived, she saw them. Mr. Quan's men, positioned with tactical precision, their silhouettes barely visible in the gloom. They were good, but they were looking for threats they understood. Cars, armed men, conventional approaches. They were not looking for a ghost. She slipped past their perimeter, a whisper of movement, and entered the cavernous main floor of the cannery through a collapsed section of wall his men had overlooked. Mr. Quan stood in the center of the vast, echoing space, illuminated by the single, bare bulb hanging from the rafters. He was alone. He turned as she emerged from the darkness, not with a start, but with a slow, deliberate motion, as if he had been expecting her to appear from that exact spot. He had been testing her, and she had passed. "You are resourceful," he stated, his voice absorbing the cavernous silence. "My mother taught me to be invisible," Zara replied, her gaze sweeping the area, noting the exits, the vantage points, the places an ambush could be staged. Two of his lieutenants materialized from the deeper shadows, their expressions a mixture of suspicion and grudging respect. One was a broad, older man with a face like a road map of old scars. The other was younger, leaner, his eyes sharp and restless. "This is her," the older man grunted, his skepticism thick in his voice. "She's a child. She is the reason we are not all dead yet," Mr. Quan corrected him, his voice sharp, silencing any further dissent. He turned his attention back to Zara. "Arthur's plan is in motion. My sources confirm a fire has been started at Warehouse 7-inch. The air in the cannery grew heavy, thick with the metallic tang of imminent violence. Suddenly, the quiet was shattered by the squeal of tires outside, followed by the heavy slam of multiple car doors. Headlights cut through the grimy windows, sweeping across the cavernous space and throwing their shadows into sharp relief. "They were here. They followed you," the younger lieutenant snarled, his hand immediately going to the weapon holstered under his jacket. "No," Zara said, her voice cutting through the tension with icy calm. "They didn't follow me. They were already watching you. They knew you'd move if you were tipped off. This was their backup plan. They wanted you isolated." Mr. Quan's eyes narrowed. She was right. He had been so focused on testing her that he had failed to see the larger trap closing around him. The main doors of the cannery burst open, and a dozen men flooded in, armed with assault rifles and a cold, disciplined fury. At their head was a man with pale, reptilian eyes and a cruel twist to his lips. "Arthur." "Quan," Arthur called out, his voice slick with false courtesy. "I heard you were having a late-night meeting. I do hope we're not interrupting." Mr. Quan's men raised their weapons, the clicks of safeties being disengaged echoing in the vast space. It was a standoff, but they were badly outnumbered. "You've broken the code, Arthur," Mr. Quan said, his voice dangerously low. "There is no code anymore," Arthur sneered. "Only progress." His men began to advance, fanning out to surround them. Panic began to flicker in the eyes of Quan's younger lieutenant. But Zara remained perfectly still. Her eyes weren't on the guns. They were scanning the ceiling, the rusted gantries and catwalks high above. She saw it then, a detail everyone else had missed. A series of heavy, rusted chains holding a massive, decommissioned conveyor belt system suspended directly above Arthur and his men. "The winch," Zara whispered, her voice urgent, directed at Quan's older, scarred lieutenant. "On the west wall. There's a manual release lever. Now." The older lieutenant, a man named Min, glanced from Zara to his boss. Mr. Quan, seeing the same desperate logic in her eyes, gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. It was a wild gamble, but it was the only one they had. As Arthur's men raised their rifles, Min broke from the group, sprinting towards the far wall, drawing a hail of gunfire that sparked and ricocheted off the concrete around him. The diversion gave Mr. Quan and his other man the opening they needed. They returned fire, the roar of their handguns deafening in the enclosed space. Arthur laughed, a harsh, grating sound. A valiant effort, but pointless, he shouted over the din. But his eyes were on Mr. Quan, not on the old man scrabbling at a rusted wall panel. Zara didn't move to fight. Her battle was one of observation. She watched Arthur's men, their formations, their lines of sight. They were disciplined but predictable, focused entirely on the immediate threat in front of them. They never looked up. Min reached the control panel, wrenching it open. He grabbed the large, rusted lever, putting his entire weight into it. With a deafening shriek of tortured metal, the gears engaged. High above, the massive chains snapped loose. The conveyor system, tons of steel and iron, plunged downwards. It didn't fall cleanly. It crashed onto the catwalks first, a cascading avalanche of metal that swept over Arthur's men. The sound was apocalyptic, a symphony of destruction that shook the very foundations of the building. Men screamed as they were crushed or thrown aside. Arthur, caught at the edge of the collapse, was hurled against a concrete pillar, his leg bending at an unnatural angle. The immediate threat was neutralized, replaced by a choking cloud of dust and the groaning of stressed metal. In the ensuing chaos, Zara's voice cut through, sharp and clear. "The south tunnel. It leads to the river. Go." Mr. Quan grabbed her arm, his grip like iron, and pulled her towards the escape route she had indicated, a dark opening she must have spotted when she first entered. In the heart of the storm she had unleashed, she was the calm, the strategist, the one who saw the path to survival. They emerged into the cool night air, the stench of river mud and decay a welcome relief from the dust-filled chaos of the cannery. The sounds of sirens began to wail in the distance, a mournful cry drawing closer. They moved quickly along the water's edge, melting back into the shadows from which Zara had come. Min and the other lieutenant, Kai, were breathing heavily, adrenaline and disbelief warring on their faces. They kept casting glances at Zara, this quiet, unassuming girl who had just orchestrated their salvation. They stopped in the deep shadow of an old bridge. Mr. Quan finally released her arm, but he didn't step away. He stood before her, the dim city lights catching the intensity in his eyes. The space between them felt charged, a silent acknowledgement of the debt he now owed her. "My father," he began, his voice rough with emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. He had a saying, "The loudest man in the room is the weakest." He believed true power was unseen, unheard, until the moment it strikes. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw past the formidable Korean Mafia boss. She saw the son of a man who lived by a forgotten code, a man who was now facing a world that had abandoned it. He created the listeners because he knew his enemies would never look for a threat in a servant's loyalty. They would never expect a weapon to be hidden in a whisper. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw, a gesture so unexpectedly tender it made her breath catch. "That symbol you made, it wasn't just his. It was mine. He taught it to me as a boy. A promise between us. That I would always listen for the truth, no matter how quietly it was spoken." In that moment, The chasm between their worlds, the diner waitress and the crime lord, vanished, replaced by a shared legacy, a connection forged in the blood and wisdom of the past. The danger hadn't passed, but something new had been born in its place, a fragile, dangerous trust. The following night, they gathered in the penthouse suite of a sleek, anonymous hotel that scraped the sky. Below, the city was a glittering tapestry of lights, oblivious to the war being plotted high above it. Arthur was wounded but not defeated. He was in hiding, gathering what remained of his forces, undoubtedly planning his revenge. Mr. Quan's organization was shaken, his authority challenged. Fear was a poison, and it was spreading. Min and Kai stood by the vast windows, their expressions grim. Mr. Quan was at his desk, a map of the city's underworld, its territories and alliances, spread before him. But he wasn't looking at the map. He was looking at Zara. She was no longer wearing her waitress uniform. She was dressed in a simple, elegant black dress, a stark contrast to the opulence of the room. She looked like she belonged there. "He will expect a direct retaliation," she said, her voice calm and measured as she walked towards the map. "He thinks you are a bull. He will expect you to charge." She placed her finger on a specific point on the map, a district controlled by a neutral party, an old Italian family that had stayed out of the recent conflicts. "He will not expect you to be a serpent," Min scoffed. "The Antonelli family? They would never side with us against Arthur. They value their neutrality above all else. They value profit more," Zara corrected him gently. "Arthur has been disrupting their shipping lanes, a quiet piracy operation to fund his takeover. They tolerate it because they fear him more than they dislike him. You will offer them a better deal. You will eliminate their problem and guarantee their routes in exchange for one thing. Information." "Information?" Kai asked, confused. "We need soldiers, not words. Arthur's power isn't in his men," Zara explained, her gaze sweeping over them, commanding their attention. "It's in his secrets. He holds the debts, the shames, the crimes of half the powerful men in this city. That is his real army. The Antonellis, with their vast network, can find out where he keeps that leverage. Once we have it, we don't just defeat him. We dismantle his entire empire from the inside out. We turn his own weapons against him." There was a stunned silence. The plan was audacious, subtle, and utterly brilliant. It was a move from a game of chess, not a street brawl. It was the way of the listeners. Mr. Quan looked from Zara's confident expression to the faces of his most trusted men. He saw their doubt warring with a newfound respect. He had spent his life commanding loyalty through fear and strength. She was offering a new path, one paved with intelligence. He rose from his desk and stood beside her, his presence a silent declaration of support. "Do it," he said, his voice resonating with finality. Make the call. In that moment, the transfer of power was complete. He was still the king, but she had become the crown.